welcome to Tech Law Talks. I am Anthony Diana, a member of Reed Smith's Tech and Data Group. In each episode of this podcast, we will discuss cutting-edge issues on technology, data, and the law. We will provide practical observations on a wide variety of technology and data topics to give you quick and actionable tips to address the issues you are dealing with every day. Hello, this is Anthony Diana. Welcome back to Tech Law Talks and our M365 in 5 governance series. We are joined by Lighthouse to explore core governance elements of Microsoft Office 365 and key operational and legal considerations. In this episode, we'll be discussing why governance matters in M365 and what exactly it means. Joining us today are Therese Caparo from Reed Smith and John Holliday from Lighthouse. Welcome, guys. All right, so let's start just generally. Like, what does it mean? People talk about M365. What does governance mean when you say governance in M365? Therese?
Sure. When we're talking about, governance in M365, what we're really talking about is putting controls around, the settings that are used in M365, how it is rolled out, how it is distributed to users. It's really about understanding how the tool is used, coming to an agreement on how it's used, and putting in place, the controls or the processes that you need among all the stakeholders to be able to manage its use and to manage any of the risks associated with its use.
And I think one of the things that's interesting, and I think it's a good thing, right? When we think about unstructured data generally, in file servers everywhere, generally there hasn't been governance, right? And we all know that. It's just ungoverned. And M365, because it's in the cloud and they've got all these configuration settings, and there is an opportunity here. So John, I guess what is the opportunity here? What do you see clients doing? What is the opportunity to really put governance around unstructured data in M365?
Right. So within the platform, you're dealing with a lot of different kinds of information, and there's different kinds of users that are participating in that, collaborating on that information. So what M365 gives you is the ability to actually create policies and settings and configurations that can be easily applied to individual teams or areas within the team to govern the information in the way that's most appropriate for that group of users. And so, for example, you can set different kinds of policies to control communications between users that's happening in team. You can have different kinds of policies that control the information or the files that are being shared as part of those conversations as well. So the flexibility in the platform in order to tune the settings and the configurations that are most appropriate for an individual team are one of the big advantages of the M365 platform.
And Therese, just in terms of how are decisions made about this? Because obviously there's the technical aspect where you can click all the buttons, but at a high level, when you're talking to senior management, how do you get to the point of making a decision on how this is going to work?
Right. Yeah. Look, and this is actually the most important feature of governance in M365. It is defining who has the authority or the approval to make decisions around governance. What we're seeing happen really is a coming together of different stakeholders. We've seen legal at the table, compliance at the table, privacy at the table, IT at the table, collaborating on what are the settings that should be rolled out, what's the business need, as compared to, are there any legal or compliance needs that also need to be met? Are there any privacy requirements that need to be met? And coming to an agreement on this is how we meet all of our objectives. I think that, one thing we've seen is that they don't always agree, and how do you break that tie? And we've seen organizations handling this differently. We've seen some that have taken it up to the board level to say there's enough of a risk versus business need here that we need to have high-level approvals that need to be made at that board level, or we're going to say our CTO is going to make that decision based on this, or, we really haven't seen the GCs being the one that make the decision, because legal is a, provider of, advice, but not really the decision maker. We've mostly seen the decision makers where there is a disagreement going up to high levels like the board level or the CTO to break that tie. But usually we see groups working together to try to come up with the best solution and make those decisions.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this, right? And I don't know if John Holliday, if you've seen the same thing. One of the great features of M365, particularly from a legal and regulatory perspective, is the ability to routinely delete data, right? Through all, whether it's Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, email and Exchange, which is obviously a sea change in terms of opportunity. But as Therese said, that is the type of thing that, the C-suite executives actually care about. So what are you seeing in terms of how people are dealing, just even with a concept of, can we routinely delete in the M365, environment?
Right. I mean, when you think about governance in any context, it's important to consider what the practical aspects of that are, and so one of the biggest things that are top of mind is, how do I get rid of data that is actually creating a risk? Right. So part of it is identifying that data and figuring out what is contributing to the risk, if we can, and can we dispose of it, and where is it going to be? You contrast that against the very dynamic nature of collaboration itself, so that data is moving around freely without impeding the productivity. So routine disposal of data that doesn't meet those particular business needs or regulatory needs is critical, and that's what the Teams platform gives you, right? You have policies and settings that actually allow you to identify and then apply the rule to actually begin the automatic disposal, in some cases, of the data that you've identified as carrying certain risk for the organization.
Yeah. So look, I think thanks for the discussion, guys. I think there's going to be a lot more on this. We're going to have additional podcasts where we get into a little bit more detail on how governance is going to apply to all these different tools in 365, whether it's Teams or otherwise. So thank you for listening. Please join again.
Tech Law Talks is a Reed Smith production. Our producer is Allie McCardle. For more information about Reed Smith's tech and data practice, please email techlawtalks@reedsmith.com. You can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and reedsmith.com, and our social media accounts at Reed Smith LLP on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. This podcast is provided for educational purposes. It does not constitute legal advice and is not intended to establish an attorney-client relationship, nor is it intended to suggest or establish standards of care applicable to particular lawyers in any given situation. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. All rights reserved.